There is one moment in the Bible where Satan was absolutely certain he had won the entire war. God's promised hero was dead, nailed to wood, bleeding out in front of a crowd. But that moment, the one Satan celebrated, turned out to be the single biggest trap ever set in history. The fall from heaven. Imagine being the most beautiful thing God ever made. Covered in precious stones, standing right beside the throne, leading worship for millions of angels across heaven. That was Lucifer, according to Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28. And for a while, that was enough. But somewhere along the line, he stopped looking at God and started looking at himself. 5 times in Isaiah 14 he said, I will climb higher, I will sit on the throne, I will be like the Most High. And God responded with one action. He threw Lucifer out of heaven like a bolt of lightning, and 1/3 of all the angels fell with him. In a single moment, the most loved angel in creation became the most hated enemy in the universe. But here is what makes this story so much bigger than a fired angel with a grudge. Everything Satan would do for the next 4,000 years was not random chaos. It was a calculated war with one target, and that target had not even been born yet. The Garden of Eden. God created 2 humans out of dust and bone, handed them a perfect world with 0 pain and 0 death, and gave them authority over the entire earth. Satan had just lost his throne, and now he was watching 2 creatures made of dirt receive everything he believed should have been his. So he did something brilliant in Genesis chapter 3. He did not show up with threats or supernatural force. He asked Eve one quiet question. Did God really say that? One question. That was all it took. She doubted, she ate, she handed the fruit to Adam, and the entire human race fell. But in that same garden, God made a promise in Genesis 3:15 that would haunt Satan for thousands of years. A child born from this woman's bloodline would one day crush his head. And that single promise turned every future event into a chess match, because Satan now knew exactly what he had to stop. So he went after the bloodline immediately, and his very first move drew blood. The murder of Abel. Adam and Eve had 2 sons, and one of them was going to carry the promised line forward. Cain brought God an offering of crops. Abel brought the best of his flock. God accepted Abel's and rejected Cain's, and Satan did not need to lift a finger after that. Jealousy did the killing for him. Cain murdered his brother in a field, and the first human death in all of history was not a disease or an accident. It was a brother's hands around a brother's throat. Satan drew first blood, and he did it without even showing up. But God gave Adam and Eve a 3rd son named Seth, and through Seth, the promised bloodline continued. The scoreboard was still tied, the corruption before the flood. This is where Satan stopped playing small. Genesis chapter 6 describes something so disturbing that scholars still argue about it today. Beings called sons of God came down and took human women as wives, and their children became the Nephilim, giants and warriors of terrifying power. Early church leaders like Tertullian believed these were fallen angels following Satan's orders, and the goal was not just to cause chaos. The goal was to corrupt the human bloodline at the genetic level so that the promised child could never be born pure. And it nearly worked. Genesis 6:5 says, every single thought in every human heart was evil all the time. Satan had poisoned almost the entire species, almost, because one family stayed clean, and that family was about to ruin everything Satan had built. Noah and the Great Flood. God drowned the world. Every human being on the planet except for 8 people. Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their wives. Some scholars estimate the pre-flood population had reached somewhere between 5 and 17 million, and God erased all of them to protect one bloodline. For Satan, this was not just a setback. This was God flipping the entire board and starting over. thousands of years of corruption, wiped out in 40 days of rain. But even those 8 survivors carried the stain of sin with them, because Noah's own son Ham brought shame on his father almost immediately after they stepped off the ark. Satan lost the battle, but the war was far from over. The Tower of Babel. Here is the darkest irony in the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 11, the survivors of the flood gathered together and said, "Let us build a tower to the heavens and make a name for ourselves." They were repeating Satan's exact sin, word for word, without him even asking. He wanted to climb above God. Now humanity wanted to climb above God. But the Almighty scrambled their languages and scattered them into roughly 70 nations across the face of the earth. And that forced Satan to change his entire strategy, because the promised bloodline was now hidden somewhere inside a scattered, fragmented world. That is, until God pointed directly at one man and said, "This one." The call of Abraham. God picked a nobody named Abraham from a city called Ur and made him a promise in Genesis chapter 12 that through his family, every nation on earth would be blessed. That blessing was the promised child, the one who would crush Satan's head. And now Satan had something he never had before: a name, a face, a specific family to hunt. Abraham became the most important man alive, and from this moment forward, every attack Satan launched was aimed at one bloodline. But Abraham believed God with everything he had, and Genesis 15:6 says that faith was counted as righteousness. However, God was about to test that faith in a way that almost handed Satan the victory on a silver platter. The binding of Isaac. God told Abraham to take his only son Isaac up Mount Moriah and kill him as a sacrifice. Think about what this looked like from the enemy's side of the board. The entire promised bloodline came down to one boy, and now God himself was asking the father to put a knife through him. If Abraham followed through, the promise was dead. If Abraham refused, his faith was broken and God's plan was undermined. Either way, Satan won. But in Genesis chapter 22, at the absolute last second, with the knife raised and Isaac on the altar, God stopped Abraham's hand and provided a ram in the bushes. The closest Satan ever came to checkmate, and God escaped with one move. But here is what nobody realized at the time. That mountaintop was a rehearsal. God was practicing for the day he would sacrifice his own son on that same hill, and Satan had no idea he was watching the blueprint for his own destruction. Now remember that detail about Mount Moriah, because it comes back at the end in a way that changes everything. The slavery in Egypt. The descendants of Abraham ended up trapped in Egypt for 430 years as slaves. Pharaoh got so terrified of how fast the Hebrews were multiplying that he ordered every newborn boy thrown into the Nile River. This was genocide, plain and simple, and the target was the promised bloodline. But the more Pharaoh crushed these people, the faster they multiplied. And one baby boy floated down that same death river in a basket, got pulled out by Pharaoh's own daughter, and grew up inside the palace of the man who tried to kill him. His name was Moses, and God had just placed a weapon inside the enemy's house. The Exodus and the Passover. When God sent 10 plagues against Egypt, he was not just freeing slaves, he was publicly humiliating every false god Satan had built up across the ancient world. Blood in the Nile destroyed the river god Hapi. 3 days of pitch darkness crushed the sun god Ra. And the death of every firstborn son struck Pharaoh himself, who Egyptians worshipped as a living god. One by one, God dismantled Satan's entire spiritual empire in Egypt, while the whole world watched. The Passover lamb whose blood protected Hebrew families from death was yet another preview of what was coming. And when roughly 3 million people walked through a split-open ocean on dry ground, Satan's grip on the mightiest nation on earth was permanently broken. But if you think Israel stayed loyal after all of that, you are about to be extremely disappointed. The wilderness and the golden calf, 40 days. That is how long it took for the Israelites to betray God after watching him split an ocean. Moses went up a mountain to receive God's commandments, and while he was gone, the people melted their gold jewelry and built a calf to worship. 3,000 people died that day as punishment, according to Exodus chapter 32. And this moment revealed something that frustrated Satan more than any defeat ever could. Even when God's people spat in his face, he refused to abandon them. Satan could corrupt humans over and over, but he could not make God stop loving them. And that terrified him more than any plague or flood. The conquest of Canaan. When Joshua led Israel into the Promised Land, they crashed straight into Satan's strongholds. Nations that burned children alive as sacrifices, practiced ritual prostitution, and worshipped every dark thing imaginable. These territories had been under Satan's influence for centuries, and God tore through them. The walls of Jericho collapsed after 7 days of marching, a victory so supernatural that no military textbook can explain it. But the Israelites got lazy. They left some of those nations standing instead of finishing the job. That single mistake gave Satan exactly what he needed, an open door back into Israel's story that would cause damage for generations. The reign of King David. God narrowed the promise even further. The coming child would be born through David's royal line according to 2 Samuel chapter 7. So Satan shifted tactics. He stopped trying to destroy the bloodline from outside and started attacking it from within. Bathsheba, the murder of her husband Uriah, the betrayal of David's own son Absalom. David's family became a war zone of lust, violence, and rebellion. But no matter how badly David fell, the bloodline held. God was not protecting a perfect man. He was protecting a promise. And that made Satan's job nearly impossible. The division of the kingdom. After Solomon died, the nation ripped itself in two. Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Solomon himself had already introduced idol worship through his 700 wives, and the northern kingdom doubled down by setting up golden calves in Dan and Bethel. This was Satan's most sophisticated political victory in the entire Old Testament. He took the greatest nation God had ever built and split it down the middle without a single battle. By 722 BC, Assyria wiped the northern kingdom off the map completely, and those 10 tribes vanished from history. But Judah survived because Judah carried the bloodline, and God was not going to let 4,000 years of war end with a political split. And yet, what came next made the division look like a warm-up. The Babylonian exile. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar burned Jerusalem to the ground, shattered Solomon's temple into rubble, and dragged the people of Judah to Babylon in chains. The temple was gone. The city was ash. God's people were prisoners in a pagan empire. If there was ever a moment where Satan believed he had finally broken the promise, this was it. But then Daniel walked into a den of lions and came out without a scratch. 3 young men stepped into a furnace so hot it killed the guards who opened the door, and they walked out without even smelling like smoke. God kept showing up in the worst possible places, and after exactly 70 years, just as the prophet Jeremiah had predicted, the exiles went home and started rebuilding. The 400 silent years. Then God went quiet. For 400 years between the Old and New Testaments, no prophet spoke, no miracle happened, and no new scripture was written. For Satan, this silence must have tasted like victory. It looked like God had finally abandoned the project. During this time, the Greeks conquered the known world, and a ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes walked into the Jewish temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar in 167 BC just to prove he could. The Jewish people suffered under one empire after another, from Persia to Greece to Rome. But what Satan read as silence, God was using as setup. The board was being arranged for the most devastating counter-move in history, the birth of Jesus, A teenage girl in Nazareth gave birth in a Bethlehem barn, and the child Satan had been hunting for 4,000 years was suddenly lying in a feeding trough, wrapped in rags. King Herod, almost certainly driven by satanic paranoia, ordered the massacre of every boy under 2 years old in Bethlehem. Scholars estimate between 6 and 20 children were murdered. But Joseph had already fled to Egypt because an angel warned him in a dream. 4,000 years of war, billions of corrupted humans, entire nations weaponized. And the promised child arrived anyway, in the most insignificant town, to the most insignificant family, in the most insignificant way imaginable. The temptation in the wilderness. This was desperation. After 40 days of fasting in the desert, Jesus was physically at his weakest, and Satan came to him face to face with 3 offers. Turn these stones into bread because you are starving. Throw yourself off the temple and let the angels catch you. Bow down and worship me, and I will give you every kingdom on earth right now, no suffering required. That third offer is the one that matters most, because Satan was offering Jesus a way to reclaim the earth without the cross, a shortcut around the pain. And Jesus turned it down with 3 scripture verses and walked away. Luke chapter 4, verse 13 says Satan left until a more opportune time. He was not done. He had one final move left, the crucifixion. Now remember what we said at the beginning. There was one moment where Satan was absolutely sure he had won. This is that moment. He entered Judas Iscariot according to Luke chapter 22. He turned the religious leaders into a murder squad. He manipulated the Roman governor into executing an innocent man. And on a hill outside Jerusalem, on the same Mount Moriah where Abraham once raised a knife over Isaac, Jesus hung on a cross and said, "It is finished." Satan must have erupted. 4,000 years of war, and the promised child was dead, nailed to wood, bleeding out in front of a mocking crowd. But 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 8 says, if the rulers of this age had understood what was really happening, they never would have crucified him. The cross was not a defeat. It was a trap that Satan walked into with his eyes wide open. Jesus died to absorb every sin that every human would ever commit, and by doing that, he permanently destroyed the only weapon Satan ever had, the power of death and guilt over humanity. The moment Satan thought he won was the exact moment he lost everything forever. And 3 days later, that tomb was empty. The resurrection and the spread of the church. The stone rolled away, Roman guards collapsed, and Jesus walked out alive just as he said he would. Over the next 40 days, more than 500 people saw him breathing, talking, and eating according to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. The head crush that God promised in Genesis 3:15 had finally happened. Satan's skull was under the heel of the child he spent 4,000 years trying to kill. And when the church launched on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, Peter preached one sermon and 3,000 people believed in a single afternoon. Within 300 years, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the same empire that crucified Jesus. Today, over 2.4 billion people call themselves Christians worldwide. Every single time Satan tried to destroy this movement through persecution, it only spread faster. The story that began with his fall from heaven will end in Revelation chapter 20, with his body thrown into the lake of fire forever, while the child he tried to stop sits on a throne that will never end. If this flipped how you see the Bible, you are going to love what we drop on this channel every week. Hit subscribe so you never miss one of these.